If you committed a crime, would you ever return to the scene? Would you walk past police officers? Would you speak to reporters? Would you watch the investigation unfold, from the front row? Stephen McDaniel did. While Lauren Giddings was being searched for, he gave interviews. He described her as kind. He said he hoped she was safe. She wasn't. She was inside his apartment. Why would someone stay so close to exposure? Why would someone return to the very place that could destroy them? At 9:31 a.m., Stephen McDaniel stood outside his apartment complex in Macon, Georgia, speaking calmly to reporters. He said he was worried. He said he hoped Lauren Giddings would come home safely. He said the entire building was shaken. He looked directly into the camera. He described her as a friend. A neighbor. Someone who deserved answers. At 9:33 a.m., investigators made a discovery inside his apartment. Lauren Giddings was not missing. She had been there. In the same building. Behind a locked door. Just feet from where Stephen McDaniel had been standing hours earlier. He hadn't left the crime scene. He had returned to it. He slept there. He walked past officers in the hallway. He answered questions. He watched search efforts unfold in real time. And when cameras arrived, he didn't step back. He stepped forward. He inserted himself into the story. Across the United States, investigators have documented a pattern. Offenders who return. Offenders who watch. Offenders who volunteer information. Offenders who stand in crowds at vigils. Offenders who join search parties. Calm, steady. They know the risk. They understand the danger. And they come back anyway. For some, it is arrogance. For others, it is control. And for a few, it is something far more complicated. So the question isn't just why criminals return to crime scenes. Macon, Georgia. June 2011. Lauren Giddings was 27 years old. A recent law school graduate. Described by friends as disciplined, focused, and close to her family. She lived alone in an apartment complex near Mercer University's law school. The building was quiet. Mostly students. Mostly routine. And directly across from her apartment lived Stephen McDaniel. He was also studying law. He was described as reserved. Soft-spoken. Intelligent. Neighbors would later say he kept to himself. There were no reports of loud arguments. No public disputes. No visible conflict between them. So when Lauren did not show up for a planned trip to visit her family, it felt unusual. Her friends noticed first. Her phone went unanswered. Her door was locked. And inside her apartment, nothing appeared violently disturbed. There were no signs of forced entry. Her belongings were still there. But Lauren was not. When police canvassed the building, they knocked on every door. They spoke to neighbors. They asked questions. And Stephen McDaniel answered. He told investigators he had seen her the night before. He said she seemed normal. He said he hoped she was safe. He did not appear nervous. But calm can mean many things. In interviews later reviewed by investigators and behavioral analysts, McDaniel's effect was described as controlled. His voice rarely rose. His posture remained steady. Some viewers would later call it shock. Others would call it calculation. As search efforts expanded, the apartment complex became a focal point. Police tape went up. Reporters arrived. Cameras set up outside the building. And Stephen McDaniel stepped outside. Short beat. He did not avoid the media. He did not retreat indoors. He volunteered to speak. Why place yourself in front of cameras, when investigators are still searching your own building? In one televised interview, he described Lauren as kind. He said the situation was terrifying. And then, during that same interview, hold tension. A reporter informed him that human remains had been discovered. His expression changed. But not in the way many expected. Measured tone. Instead of panic, there was stillness. He asked, in the building? Not, is she alive? Not, are they sure? In the building? Micro cliffhanger. That distinction would later matter. Investigators began focusing more closely on the apartment complex itself. They examined entry points. They reviewed key access. They looked at security patterns. And then they looked across the hall. Stephen McDaniel's apartment. He had not left town. He had not distanced himself. He remained inside the perimeter of the investigation. For many offenders, distance is safety. For Stephen McDaniel, proximity was the choice. And that choice raises a larger question. Why do some offenders return to the very environment that threatens exposure? Why do they watch? Why do they speak? Why stay within arm's reach of discovery? Because sometimes the crime scene is not just a location. It becomes part of the offender's psychological world. And leaving it means surrendering control. Investigators returned to the building. They rechecked doors. They reviewed timelines. They asked the same questions again. When was Lauren last seen? Who had access to her apartment? Who knew her schedule? One detail stood out. There were no signs of forced entry. Her door showed no damage. Her locks were intact. If someone entered unlawfully, how? Unless they didn't need to force their way in. Stephen McDaniel lived directly across the hall. As officers continued their work, they secured a search warrant. They entered his apartment. What they found inside would change the direction of the investigation. Digital evidence. Surveillance behavior. Planning. Stephen McDaniel had been watching Lauren Giddings. Measured. Not casually. Not recently. 4 months. Investigators later determined he had entered her apartment before. He had made copies of keys. He had studied her schedule. He had researched how long it takes for a body to decompose. And yet, when cameras arrived, he stood outside and spoke as if he were just another concerned neighbor. The question shifts. It is no longer only why he returned. It becomes why he never truly left. Because the crime scene, in this case, was not a remote location. It was his home. He slept there after the killing. He showered there. He walked the same hallway where investigators moved in and out. What does it take for someone to remain that close? In criminal behavior research, proximity. In Boulder, Colorado, John Ramsey appeared on television after the death of his daughter. JonBenet Ramsey. The presence near media. The presence near investigators. The presence near the scene. It is not always proof. But in certain cases, it becomes part of a larger behavioral picture. So what drives someone to stay close? For some, it is control. After committing an act that creates chaos, proximity can restore order. They monitor what police know. They listen for details that have not yet been released. They measure how close investigators are. Knowledge becomes oxygen. Psychological layer deepens. For others, it is ego. A need to see the reaction. A need to witness the shock. A need to stand inside the story. Remaining close allows them to observe the impact. Sometimes even to feel superior to the investigation. And sometimes, it is about narrative. If they stay close, they can shape perception. They can frame themselves as cooperative. as helpful, as grieving. And that image can delay suspicion. In the case of Stephen McDaniel, he conducted interviews calmly. He discussed Lauren in the past tense before confirmation. He focused on specific details. When reporters informed him that remains had been found, his reaction was immediate. Shock. But not surprise at location. The mind often reveals what the mouth tries to conceal. Psychologists studying post-offense behavior note 3 recurring motivations for return or proximity. 1. Reassurance. 2. Control. 3. Validation. Reassurance that the crime remains undiscovered. Control over information. Validation through witnessing the aftermath. In McDaniel's case, investigators uncovered evidence of prior surveillance. He had entered Lauren Giddings' apartment before. He had prepared. Preparation changes the psychological equation. This was not a sudden argument. This was planning. And planning often creates attachment. When an offender invests time in surveillance, in study, in access, they may feel a distorted sense of ownership over the environment. And leaving it behind can feel like surrender. So instead of fleeing, they remain. But staying close increases risk. Every additional hour near investigators, every additional interview, every additional statement, increases the chance of inconsistency. And inconsistency is what investigators look for. Eventually, digital forensics connected Stephen McDaniel directly to the crime. He was arrested. In 2014, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. There was no dramatic trial. No prolonged courtroom battle. Just admission. Lauren Giddings was 27 years old. She had just graduated from law school. She had plans. She had a future. For Lauren Giddings' family, the word did not restore what was lost. It did not return time. It did not undo fear. But it ended uncertainty. And sometimes, certainty is the only form of closure available. The person who stood in front of cameras pretending to search for her had been inside the truth the entire time. There is a reason these cases disturb us. It is not only the violence. It is the performance. The ability to stand among neighbors. To speak calmly. To remain. We expect guilt to flee. But sometimes, guilt lingers. The next time you see someone pleading on camera, asking for help, standing inside police tape, ask yourself one question. Are they searching? Or are they watching? Because the closer someone stays to a lie, the harder it becomes to maintain it.